All of a sudden, across the West, including America, we have this sudden spike of teenage girls deciding they're transgender, often with their friends and often after the encouragement of social media influencers.
Mm-hmm.
A record number of young people are being referred to the Children's Gender Service at the Tavistock. There were just 77 patients referred here 10 years ago. By last year, the number had climbed to 2,590 children, the majority female at birth.
People are not interested in discussing the science. We've all got to believe that there's no such thing as a boy or a girl, that we're all somewhere in between. Now, I don't believe that.
Because I think if you can mold the way children view, and you mold it in a way that's not based in anything real, you can control them. And you can control basically how they go forward in life and the way they think. I mean, I don't think it's about gender, only gender, right? It's about also this larger anti-scientific theme.
Being a woman doesn't seem so great to them. And then you see that, biological boys are able to outcompete them in sports. No one stands up for them. I think it's pretty clear that in the competition between, girls and trans, youth in terms of esteem in the broader culture, girls have fallen. And I do think girls are feeling that. But they are high anxiety and high depression girls. They have a lot of mental health issues. And for the first time, the moment they get to high school or middle school and decide they're transgender, it's the first time they get so much encouragement and love, especially online, and sometimes from adults. And some of these adults are not, are not up to very much good.
Spent most of my time online, didn't do anything in real life at all. Really, I didn't have any friends. I didn't go to school at that point. So the only people I really talked to on a daily basis were the people that I talked to online. And that definitely didn't help. I was basically consumed by trans media.
That's a really big part of the queer cult, is to make you feel like you're isolated from everyone who's not also queer.
Sterilizing people against their will is exactly what the Nazis did. And children don't have a free will. They don't understand anything. If you tell children that Santa Claus is real, they believe that. If you tell them they can change their sex, they believe that.
Seem to have a savior complex, many of them, in which they think they are, teaching kids is boring, but saving lives through this, emancipation from I don't know, binary, biology is somehow more valorous. Put this curriculum into the anti-bullying curriculum. So usually you would think this would go into the sex ed curriculum, which parents are allowed to opt out of. But they put it into the anti-bullying curriculum under the pretext that you couldn't possibly police bullying unless you taught every child that only they know their true gender.
A young person had very clearly told me and my colleague that my mum wants the hormone more than I do.
Ali allowed Patrick to take her own estrogen medication from the age of just 13.
Their kids, and the idea that some professional who shows up for an hour and decides, oh, wait a second, everything that person who raised that kid, everything they think is wrong, I know the truth. The profound hubris of that, and the idea that they should be accepted, whereas the poor, schnook who actually raised the child should be completely undercut and ignored, is a very disturbing trend.
Having that connection with people online was like my only interpersonal relationship at that point that I felt valued me. It became an issue of them being supportive and them demonizing my parents to the point where I didn't see my biological family as my family anymore, and I saw trans people as my family.
I mean, these are the kind of games that 14-year-old girls play with, to get rid of. I mean, they just do. I mean, they really want to stick it to mom. The problem is now we have an engine that will come in and take your child away if you're not going along with the party line. We're living with this affirmative care model now, which means that across the West, doctors are told with this diagnosis, you must agree with the patient, no matter how young she is or what her other mental health issues. When she self-diagnoses with gender dysphoria, you agree with her, and your next question is basically, when do we start the medication?
As a psychologist, did you ever feel that you could say to a parent, I don't believe your child is trans?
No, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to leave the service, because as a psychologist, I felt that if I ever spoke to a family like this, I would immediately be called transphobic.
Maybe we are medicating gay kids, maybe we're medicating kids with autism, maybe we are medicating traumatised children. And if we are, we're doing bad things to these vulnerable kids.
Then I went to a therapist from the LGBT center who told me that she was ready to get me on hormones from day one, you know, like excited and ready to just help me transition. So would basically just talk about her life the entire time and tell me like stories from her life. She was like 60, and she would just like tell me about when she was growing up as like a lesbian, and I would just be like, okay, you're my therapist, but okay.
Extremely upset and, you know, just realizing how traumatic the experience was and how deceitful I feel that the clinicians were during my care. So yeah, it was heartbreaking.
You think that their emotional problems are going to get better by giving them estrogen? Fine. That's called optimism. It's not called scientific method. So I think the whole thing is experimental in that sense.
I had just gone through a very traumatic sexual experience with an older man on the internet, thankfully not in real life, but it was still extremely traumatic for me and affected my confidence, my sense of self-worth.
The transition was rather unhealthy motivation that went along with my eating disorder.
Hearing from like hundreds of people, and I think some of the common characteristics are they tend to be around their mid-20s. They're mostly female and mostly same-sex attracted, most are lesbians, and often autistic as well.
Because testosterone delivers a euphoria, and it suppresses anxiety, which is some of these girls' biggest problems. So they go on it and they think it's confirmation that they got their diagnosis right. And they feel great and they can't wait to tell their friends.
I didn't realize that it was possible to not hate my body. And I think transitioning for me was the ultimate form of self-harm.
When I say when I was a guy, I understand. Obviously, I wasn't ever a guy.
And after I did, as I was starting to experience regrets, I became much better acquainted with the part of me that was essentially female. I realized that I am, in some ways, very essentially female.
My body was made the way it is, perfectly. There's nothing wrong with me.
To realize that I could be happy without completely changing who I am.